Welcome to E-Trees Enhancements, and if you read the title of the video, you know exactly what you're here for. So if you're just looking for a short and sweet answer as to whether this bolt carrier group is good, then it is. There you go. You have all you need. Go ahead and buy it. It's excellent. However, if you plan on using it on 300 Blackout, I highly recommend you watch the entire video because there are some things to watch out for with this particular bolt carrier and 300 Blackout as a round being subsonic, supersonics, suppressed and unsuppressed. So there's some things to know regarding this bolt carrier, and the system does not apply to 300 Blackout the same way that 223 does for this particular bolt carrier. So in true E-Trees Enhancements fashion, this video is going to be quite long and information heavy. So I highly recommend you grab some popcorn and a drink because we are about to dive in. Anyway, let's get to it. So this is the Bootleg adjustable bolt carrier. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with it. It's been heavily mentioned as far as a great adjustable option for those who want to run suppressed that don't want to change gas blocks or anything of that nature. But there is really not that much mention as far as this being used in the 300 Blackout cartridge. And I can definitely see why after using it. It is definitely only advertised as a 5.56 caliber or 223, but we are going to discuss this particular bolt carrier and its use with 300 Blackout, especially because it shares the same bolt that 300 Blackout would use. So you could potentially just buy this as is to run on your 300 Blackout setup. So one of the things that you may or may not notice is that this is, I don't know if this is a newer design of the Bootleg adjustable bolt carrier. And the reason why I mentioned this is because on the images that you see for the Bootleg adjustable, there's usually some relief cuts on here. See these shiny portions where this is where it usually rides against the receiver. There's usually some cuts here to reduce the amount of material, almost like a Knights Armament sand cutter. Now, my particular model did not come with this, and it's really not that big of a deal because this is how all standard bolt carriers are to begin with, aside from their own custom milling here. But nonetheless, it's really not that big of a deal. I would have liked to have the relief cuts, but it's probably an added expense that they got rid of because it wasn't necessary. So not that big of a deal. I still have never had any malfunctions with this particular bolt, and having more surface area will allow for the bolt carrier to wear the receiver less. At least it's the idea. Whether this actually matters, who knows? Anyway, so now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about why you would use this particular bolt carrier on a 300 Blackout setup. So the original intent for this bolt carrier is to have, as the symbols suggest, the U for unsuppressed and the S for suppressed. This is a bleed-off style bolt carrier, in the sense that once the air enters here into the chamber, it actually vents the excess out. You can completely close it. There's a 4 position. You can see right there, there's U, 1 dot, 2 dot, and then S. So you can stage it into either position, and the great thing about it is that it's somewhat adjustable. It's not just one or the other, which is great because some specific calibers would require this sort of effect. But the best part of this is that it's repeatable, and which is something that not very many adjustable gas blocks or adjustable components have. This is repeatable. Even if I remove this specific adjustable setup or this adjustable piece, it still has the capability of returning exactly where it was, and that allows its maintenance, which is something that you cannot maintain on other gas blocks that are infinitely adjustable, because you would have to remember exactly how many clicks you went out. Whereas this one, I could just push it out and then just bring it right back to where it was, and I'm done. Typical of what you would see on a gas piston rifle with adjustable gas system. So this is an excellent bolt carrier to solve that problem, where the benefits of the gas piston being repeatable is no longer the case, especially when you run one of these, either 223 or 300 Blackout. So let's talk about the benefits of 300 Blackout on this particular bolt carrier. So One of the key things about 300 Blackout is that you are able to run supers and subs. We all know this. If you're watching this video, you probably know this. If you don't, well, now you know. But subsonic rounds produce significantly less pressure than supersonics. And this is pretty obvious, but it does need to be explained for some people that don't understand the whole concept of chamber pressure versus port pressure. So 300 Blackout subsonics are extremely sensitive to gas pressure for cycling action. Obviously, this is not a problem in a bolt gun, but this being a semi-auto, gas-driven, gas-operated rifle, then they are extremely sensitive to gas pressure. So for the use of this particular bolt carrier on 300 Blackout, you completely have to disregard the U and the S. The U and the S is unsuppressed and suppressed do not apply to you with this bolt carrier on 300 Blackout. And that is because unsuppressed completely closes off the vent and suppressed completely opens the vent. So there's bleed off at the S and then there's no bleed off at the U. So what you will do to set it up on your particular rifle or pistol or SBR, according to the new laws that they're trying to implement, you will have to set this adjustment to U, which is the fully closed off position, to give you full gas. And you will want to gas your particular 300 Blackout platform to operate subsonics at the U with a suppressor. There is virtually no need for you to have this if you do not have a suppressor. That's something that I should have mentioned earlier. No need to have this if you do not have a suppressor. There's also no point in you shooting subsonics out of your platform if you do not have a suppressor, because it defeats the entire purpose. You're losing a lot of ballistics and you're not reducing sound whatsoever. So unless you have a suppressor, this is useless to you. Okay, now that we've got the suppressor out of the way and the platform, you want to adjust mass and spring rates for subsonics with your suppressor, and this in the position at U as in fully closed, so that does not vent any gas. Once you are able to do this and you're able to get reliable function out of your subsonics with this gas fully closed, then you're good to use the bolt carrier as it's should be intended to use, which is actually not how it was intended to use, but how it will function great with your setup. So the whole point of you gassing this bolt carrier with it fully closed with subsonics is that you have now achieved the maximum amount of gas you will want to supply to your firearm. So you have now a fully closed setup that operates under full gas for subsonics. Great. Now what if you want to shoot supersonics? Well, now you have a dilemma. The dilemma is, well, you just tuned your rifle to operate off of the port pressure on a very low pressure round. And the moment you put 300 Blackout supersonics on your rifle or platform, it is now going to be extremely overgassed because you have now bumped up the pressure considerably. So this is where this guy sits in. This is where the benefit of this guy really comes in. And that is going to be on the fact that you can now bleed off that excess pressure by simply coming in through the ejection port and rotating this to adjust it. So in this case, this would be fully closed at the U, and then you can come in and bleed off some, and bleed off some more, and then bleed off some more. On my particular setup with 125 grain supers, I run it fully open, and it is amazing. I have full operation, full lock back, and then I'm still able to operate exactly as the rifle intended without beating it to death, which is excellent. Now, there is the scenario where you would want to run without the suppressor and supersonics, which does not apply because, which does not apply to subsonics, because you would not want to run subsonics without the suppressor. So let's say you take the suppressor off and you plan on running supersonics. Fully open, your rifle may not operate. So what you do is instead you close it partially. And then you find the gas setting
that allows you to run your supersonics without the suppressor, but without it being fully closed. That would be too overgas to function. So this allows you to have a partial adjustment if in between. Your rifle may be different. You might need to run it fully closed for supersonics. In my particular case, this is still too aggressive. But if I run it all the way out at fully open and full vent, this is too much bleed off, so the rifle or the platform actually doesn't cycle. Yeah. So you need to find that in between. So you have the best of all three worlds, where you have the ability to run subsonic suppressed, supersonic suppressed, and supersonics unsuppressed without beating the platform to death, and with repeatability, which means you can always go back and adjust it to where you need it without any actual change to the firearm. Now, let's talk about some of the negatives about this particular setup as far as 300 blackout. And this applies exclusively to 300 blackout. So one of the negatives is, of course, sound. So supersonic 300 blackout suppressed is still loud. There's no getting away from it. So in this scenario, it does get louder if you're running supersonics suppressed, because you are now venting out of the gas port or out of the breech. So you're now venting excess gas out of there. Is it very much noticeable? No, but it is there, and you will have gas venting out constantly. Now this won't apply for subsonics because you're going to be running it fully closed. So it will act as a standard bolt carrier when you're running subsonics, which is the goal. That's the whole point of you running subsonics, is create the least amount of noise. I will say that the better your suppressor is, the better this will function. So keep that in mind. One of my buddies has a Thunder Chicken Q suppressor, and that thing is just ridiculously quiet. That being said, never tried it on my platform, so I know what my rugged razor sounds like. So keep in mind that this bolt carrier is not the end-all be-all. You still require a good suppressor to reduce the amount of sound. Now here's another negative. The negative on this particular bolt carrier is something that's not mentioned and that I discovered by accident while recording myself for the 300 blackout barrel videos that I've made. And that is that this vent right here vents gas directly at the ejection port. So normally, under regular conditions, you would have this particular ridge right here as the bolt carrier starts to travel back. This little ridge right here would open up the actual dust cover on the platform, and that's a mechanical opening. And then after that, it vents. Well, in this case, you're venting constantly. So the moment gas is introduced, you immediately start venting, and you will notice carbon buildup on your dust cover. And not only that, but the gas pressure coming through here is so violent that it will actually launch the dust cover open, cause it to bounce back closed while it's actually ejecting the case. So it's extracting case is coming out, and then the fact that 300 blackout is a shorter case, it's a 35 millimeter over a 45 millimeter, which is the 223556. It ejects a little bit earlier, which is why you cannot use the rule of 3 o'clock ejection for 300 blackout for perfect gassing. It just does not work because your shell ejects early, about 10 millimeters earlier. So due to this and all this timing situation, because the dust cover is being launched open at full force, it bounces back, the case ejects early, and the dust cover will actually hit the case and bounce it back into your chamber. Into your breech. That's a big problem. Now, it never actually caused a malfunction for me, and that's why I never noticed it until I looked at it under video, and that is, I could definitely see the difference in ejection just based on having my dust cover closed. So let me show you something. So this is one of the dust covers that I ran with the Bootleg adjustable bolt carrier. And there's two things you will notice here. One of them is that you have this buildup right here, almost like corrosion. That's for the vent of the Bootleg bulk carrier. That shows that it actually starts venting gas before it actually starts opening. So the primary thing that opens this dust cover is going to be the vent. If you have the vent fully closed, that's not going to be a problem. But if you have it open, this is going to be a thing. And it is going to start building up right there. I can't tell if that's corrosion or just the powder marks, but it is there nonetheless. Now, I couldn't really find my other dust cover because I had a BCM dust cover that I also used on this particular platform. And that one actually had brass marks, and I will put the picture on the video because I did actually take a picture of it. But there was brass marks right here of the dust cover bouncing closed and then hitting the round back into the breech. Now, you will also notice that it's shiny right here, and that is because of the geometry of this particular bulk carrier. This bulk carrier cut right here is entirely different than a standard mil-spec bulk carrier cut. And because of that, when you close the dust cover, it actually doesn't want to close. You essentially run into a scenario where the top of this guy is hitting this portion of the bulk carrier. There's not enough clearance on it. I don't know why they chose to do this. I don't know if it's exclusively for the adjuster. They could have legitimately just beveled it right there and that would have worked just fine. But nonetheless, if you plan on using a standard dust cover on the Bootleg, you will have to modify it like this. Just basically take some material off till it closes. Or one dust cover in particular that has actually worked just fine with this Bootleg bulk carrier is the Magpul polymer dust cover. It actually fits just fine and closes just fine. Now, I've only tried it on a BCM upper with this bulk carrier, so I cannot attest to anything else, but in my particular experience with that combination, it actually fit perfectly and there was no need for modification. That being said, you do have to consider that this guy will be launching your dust cover open and could cause the possibility of bouncing the case back into the breech. So keep that in mind. You could potentially drill a hole on the Magpul dust cover to vent, to allow the gases to vent, but now you've just created a hole on something that's supposed to prevent dust from coming in. So my solution was just to eliminate the dust cover altogether. If you're against that, well, just know that every Honey Badger right now in current production does not have a dust cover. The GQ Armory Paladin also does not have a dust cover, even though it does have provisions for it. It does not come with one. And even though they don't run this setup, I'm not really sure what their purpose was. But that being said, I don't think this is a particular problem because DI, or internal piston as it should be called, is very good at venting gas right here at the breech. So therefore, anything built up right here, it's just going to launch out, and it's going to be even more aggressive now that you have the bleed off right there. It's just going to shoot everything out of that breech. So I don't run a dust cover anymore, and it has solved all my ejection problems. Not that it actually was a problem for me, but it is no longer having that weak ejection that I've been able to capture under video. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, as far as maintenance and use, this thing's like a standard bulk carrier. You maintain it like a standard bulk carrier, except for this portion right here, which is the adjustable part. It's super easy to clean. You basically just rotate it out and it comes out. Super easy. So you can slide a Q-tip in there, clean the carbon buildup, scrape the carbon buildup off of this, obviously with something that's non-marring so that you don't damage the surface. Even these are replaceable. Bootleg does sell these individually on their website. Now, as far as use, you have to be cautious with this guy. It is not as simple as just put it in and send it. And what I mean by this is that although it is designed to be, put in, you do have to fight the carbon a little bit, but it is supposed to fall into a groove. So when you position it, you are supposed to rotate it and make it fall into the groove. There is a little detent, if you can call it that. It's more of like a spring or like a spring pin. And that is what actually counts as your detent. The only thing that's keeping this guy in is that little tab that there's a machine groove for, and then the detent prevents its rotation so it doesn't come out. Now, if it does come out of position and it comes up, you will be gouging your upper receiver. That's a given. It will not come out, but you will be gouging the hell out of your upper receiver. So you have to make sure that at least in the suppressed setting, you are actually in the notch. And that is something else that you have to really look into. And that is, you got to make sure that every time you reposition it, it falls in the notch. And there's a really easy way to tell it. There's sort of like a wiggle. It's not an exact notch. So there's a little bit of movement in each position. You can see it's relatively easy to turn compared to the actual rotation of the position. The only one where you won't really notice this is on the unsuppressed setting, because the detent actually completely stops its travel with the little tab that sticks out. So once you go to unsuppressed, it basically just lands in the right spot. But anything in between, I would highly suggest that you give it a light wiggle and make sure that it actually fell into the detent, so that you make sure that it's not going anywhere. Especially in the suppressed setting, where you could accidentally overshoot and fall off the detent and then have this thing rotate out of you. So something to keep in mind. You always want to make sure that there's that wiggle. And it's something that I check every time I service the firearm, because I want to make sure that everything is in its correct place. And when carbon builds up on this, you won't be able to feel this, so you want to break through the carbon as part of your regular maintenance. Now, thankfully, when you move it, it always falls into the same place because it's repeatable, so this is really not that big of a problem. It's just an extra step in maintenance. As far as recommendations for this, I mean, if you really want to run a dust cover, run the Magpul dust cover. Otherwise, there's really not much to do here. I don't know what the bolt is made out of. They claim it's S7 tool steel. I think the bolt carrier itself is out of S7 tool steel, but I don't know what the bolt's made out of, or if that's actually what it is, because Bootleg does sell bolt kits, and they're 9310. So take that for what it's worth. Nothing wrong with 9310, especially with the lower pressure cartridge that 300 Blackout is. So not that big of a deal. Other than that, this thing's been running flawlessly, and there's really no need to change anything. In its current configuration, it's been excellent, even with its original gas rings, which I have had gas rings blow out from this particular platform on BA bolt carriers. Now, as far as future tests that I want to perform on this is somewhat new. It does not, it's sort of an upgrade. Now, I've had no issues with the current setup, and that's what essentially I'm reviewing, but I am doing a test on my particular setup where I'm trying to see if I can improve the efficiency of the gas seal. And right now I've got a one-piece gas ring, helical gas ring as they like to call it. This is a Rubber City Armory gas ring. It's not one of the JPs. It's not a McFarland. This is straight out of Rubber City Armory's website, which is a company that I use their bolt carriers from. And I really like their quality control. So this is what I'm testing. I have not fired it yet. I installed it in hopes that it'll do a few things. One is improve the gas seal because there is no gaps. And two, reduce friction, which is something that is beneficial to this particular platform, just for the sheer fact that I am running a reduced power spring that would potentially make it more difficult for it to chamber the round. So if I can reduce the friction of camming the bolt, then I can improve my chances of chambering. Once again, I have not had this issue in this particular platform, even with the standard gas rings, so take that for what it's worth. But the whole concept, the reduction in drag is more of like a plus rather than the actual goal. The actual goal is to improve the gas efficiency when running subsonics, which is the main point of having this thing fully closed. If I can improve the efficiency of subsonics, then I'm just improving the efficiency of the bolt carrier without any real modifications, and it still allows me to do the full function of the bleed off without any real drastic effect. Nonetheless, that is it for the review of the bolt carrier. I hope you found this informational. You can always, if you don't trust the material of this bolt, you can always swap it out for like a BCM. Rubber City Armory makes good nitride bolt carrier or bolts. You can buy all these internals, and the only thing you really need is the carrier. That's how I wish I would have been able to buy this bolt carrier, but it is what it is. It's really not the big of a deal, and Bootleg is owned by PWS, which makes outstanding products. So there's really no doubt in my mind that this thing will just be great. So far, I think I have about maybe 1,000 rounds through this, or less, maybe a little less, both suppressed and unsuppressed, fully open, fully closed, you name it. I've tried it all with this bolt carrier. It's been amazing. You can see it's heavily worn in the cam pin. You can see it's heavily worn on one side. I always make sure to put it back in the same position. So it's been excellent, and no issues with 300 blackout, as long as you gas it or adjust mass and spring weight accordingly. That being said, let's exit the bench.
Oh wow, you actually made it this far. Well, I mean, I got nothing else for you. The bolt carrier is great, as I mentioned at the beginning, and it's very useful. You just kind of caught me looking at my next build, which is pretty much already done, but I'm in the process of finishing all the little nitty-gritty details, and this is a 308 build that recoils extremely soft without the need of a muzzle brake. So there's a lot of physics going on this one in particular, so the video will be coming soon. Anyway, if you're interested in this, please go ahead and subscribe, and I'll be delivering the video of this one hopefully soon. Hopefully, because 308's pretty expensive. But yeah, anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time.